finance.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Financial Independence Podcast, the podcast where I get inside the brains of some of the best and brightest in the personal finance space to find out how they're achieving financial independence. Today on the show, I have Nick Loper from SideHustleNation.com. I actually met Nick at a conference back in Charlotte last year, and we had a good chat over some beers, and I was excited when he agreed to come on the show because I realized that side hustles are actually something I've not really talked about much, but they could play a huge part in someone's path to financial independence. For example, if you could generate $500 a month doing something that you enjoy that could continue into your early retirement, you know, that's $150,000 less that you'd have to save before you could potentially quit your job. Plus, if you create a side hustle that you actually enjoy doing, you know, that's something to do after you leave work. You know, it's probably a difficult thing to go from, you know, working full time down to not having to work at all. So having something there that you enjoy doing that, you know, gives you purpose, that's a great thing, and that would likely ease your transition into early retirement. So yeah, without further delay, Nick, thanks a lot for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
So my audience, you know, may not know too much about your site. It's not really in the finance space. It's more in the entrepreneurial space. So could you just tell a little bit about yourself and, you know, how did Side Hustle Nation come about?
Side Hustle Nation is all about earning job-free income, trying to build yourself an extra income stream outside of your traditional 9-to-5 employment. And it came about because that was my experience in entrepreneurship, was trying to figure out an escape path from the corporate world. And it was a comparison shopping site about footwear that ended up being the vehicle that let me retire, early retire. Wow. And there was lots of ups and downs in that business, but it had a great run. And so I wanted to do, after a little bit of soul searching, figure out, okay, what do I want to be known for? Like, if people Google me, I'm really excited about that prospect of helping people start something on the side, right? Because the traditional entrepreneurship narrative is go raise venture capital, quit your job, jump off this cliff into the unknown. It's like, no, you don't have to do that. Like, there's a safer way to get started. That's
excellent. Yeah, no, that never appealed to me. The standard entrepreneurial path. But yeah, side hustle is just an amazing thing for people in general, but especially for people pursuing early financial independence. So before we dive into, you know, the shoe business, what did you do before that?
So this was right after graduation. I got a corporate job with Ford. Actually, it's helping their parts and service division try and sell more parts, I guess. Working kind of as a liaison between the manufacturer and the dealer.
All right. Okay. So how long into your career did you start, you know, trying to get a side hustle going?
Immediately. I was like almost, and thankfully had actually started a little bit even before graduation. And so kind of had this little thing on the side. It was maybe $200-$300 a month, which just about covered my rent in college, which I was like really, really excited for. And it kind of grew from this. So what this was at the time was like tiny, like text link ads for specific models of shoes. It was like, I don't even know if this is still like allowed in Google, right? But I would say, okay, if you're looking for this model of shoe, like here's somebody who's selling it, and I would put my affiliate link in there. And so if anyone bought, like I would get a commission on that. And I started out with a budget of like $1 a day because I was poor. I was in college trying to figure out this stuff. But that was how I kind of validated the idea, and then realized the only way to scale that up would be to, you know, have an actual site built, because it was a pain, like to figure out, okay, which site has the best deal, who should I link to, right? My theory was, hey, if I had a site that like aggregated all of the different stores, those rankings would automatically update and people could, you know, choose from there. And ups and downs to that model because it kind of added an extra intermediate step, but it ended up having a pretty good run. Actually ran that site from kind of in its very, very early day, like those text linking days, started in 2004, and actually shut the site down last summer in 2014. So it
Wow.
had almost a 10-year a 10-year run selling shoes online.
That's amazing. How did you pick that? How did you pick that idea? Was this just you had a problem finding cheap shoes, and or did somebody tell you this is an issue, or how did you come up with it?
I wish I could tell you that I was like, man, one night, late at night, I was searching for shoes and I just couldn't find them. I actually interned with a company in Seattle that was one of the pioneering, online footwear retailers. At that time, I was like, people buy shoes online? Wouldn't you want to try them on? This is a weird business. That was my first introduction to e-commerce, to affiliate marketing, to Google SEO, to pay-per-click advertising, all that stuff. And so footwear is very high margin products. They have relatively high commissions, and kind of was able to. My theory was like the comparison shopping sites that existed in that day were trying to be everything to everyone, and so their algorithms weren't very tight. And so my theory was, hey, I could provide better search results, like a better user experience in the existing sites, and work directly with the advertisers, with the retailers, to hopefully negotiate some better deals or some exclusive offers, and then my final theory was that, hey, if people are searching specifically for shoes and they see a site that says like shoes in the domain name, they're going to say, hey, this might be more relevant to my search than pricegrabber.com or something like, more general.
Right. Now, so how long before you were able to quit your full-time job how long did it take to build up to something that would sustain you?
I stayed at Ford for 3 years, and I probably stuck around longer than I needed to, but wanted that extra little bit of validation before it was safe, before sure. making that leap, because I wanted to have a track record of earnings, and I don't forget my metric was like I want to have 6 or 12 months where it meets or exceeds either my day job income or meets or exceeds like our fixed expenses or something like that, just to have a little bit of a buffer, have a little bit of a track record. And the sad thing is, like, none of it ended up mattering, because on the first day of self-employment, my first day of I call it my retirement, Google decided to shut down like my entire advertising account. Whoa. And they said, hey, this is a low quality site. We can't have this on our network. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? You had no problem in the past 2 years. What is going on?
Oh, no way. So that must have been a big shock and terrifying if you had just quit your job and were relying on this 100% for your income.
Yeah, I was. So with Side Hustle Nation, one of the common themes is if you're relying on one source of income, like that's kind of a risky position to be in. And the sad thing is I found myself in the exact same position as an entrepreneur on that first day. Not only that, I was relying on one source of income, but like overwhelmingly relying on one source of traffic. And so it kind of took all summer, it took like 3 months to kind of get back in their good graces, kind of make some tweaks to the site. And, they finally came back with, oh, it looks like we made an error. Wow. Like, you're fine. You're good to go. It's like, that was a really expensive and a really stressful error. Come on, guys.
Oh man, that's brutal. That's a great point, though. That don't rely on one single source of income, and that's the same goes true for people that have a career, a normal salary. Because as we've seen, over the last 10 years, that could disappear just as quickly as Google made your site disappear almost. I'm sure. So.
Yep.
So what did you do in those 3 months to get it back up and running? Did you look for other sources of traffic, or?
So one of the things that I think part of this was algorithmically based. They say, hey, the purpose of your site, you only exist to drive traffic to other sites, which was true, because like I wouldn't get paid unless somebody went to another site and bought shoes. But it's like, Google, who are you to judge? The sole purpose of your search engine is to drive traffic to other sites.
Right.
And so it's like, at that time they had just bought like this comparison shopping network, and they're like, clearly you see the value in this kind of thing, but you kind of want the piece of pie for yourself. It's like, fine, whatever. So, but part of their algorithm, my guess was like the percentage of inbound or internal links versus external links on that site. So if somebody hit a landing page and there were like 50 different shoe stores, like, every link is pointing out to go to different shoe stores versus like internal navigation. Like, here are some similar shoes in this category. Here are some similar shoes in this price range. Here are some boots that you might be interested in. So we added a bunch of internal links to kind of balance out those external links.
Right.
And have added some kind of template driven content to the bottom of the page to try and try and I don't think they were really fooled by it, but try and add a little bit more meat to the page to say like, hey, look, this is more than just straight up comparison site. And we added some cool tools like so the eventual version of the site was called Shoe Sniper, and so we invented like this sniper tool where it was like, hey, these shoes are $80 today, but I would really love it if you would send me an email when they hit 60. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of invented this sniper feature or like price alert feature that would say, hey, pick whatever price you want and we'll send you an alert when they hit that price.
Nice. Okay, so you had this scare where you thought maybe this would, not work out if you can't get back in Google's good books. So did you start diversifying a bit? Did you think about creating new sites? And when did actually Side Hustle Nation come about?
That didn't come about until probably 4 or 5 years later. And the reason was I was kind of heads down working on the shoe business and kind of a handful of other projects. But that lesson of, trying to diversify definitely hit home. And so now I probably have, 8 or 10 different income streams at any one time. And not to say that, all of them are full-time job replacing deals, because most of them aren't, but it's kind of fun to have, all of these different things going on. And that's kind of been fun from the standpoint of being able to share these different stories and experiments with Side Hustle Nation, and also like, interview all these other people who have like crazy, part-time business stories, and see what they've managed to build on the side.
Yeah, and having a bunch of little things, they actually do add up quite quickly, and it's surprising how just little tiny projects that are just producing just a little bit a month enough of those will add up to something significant. And your wife, she also has side hustles as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so she's an engineer by day and a photographer by night. So she started with her friend a wedding photography business that you kind of started out as a hobbyist, as pretty much any business does, right? Like I gotta learn these skills somewhere, so I gotta start as a hobby. And one night, I don't know if wine was involved or what, but they got up the nerve to post an ad on Craigslist, and I was like, "This is the dumbest idea ever. Who's looking for photographers on Craigslist?" And it turns out I was dead wrong, because within the first few days they had like half a dozen different inquiries, and they immediately like raised their price, and they were doing that because it was like, hey, you're kind of taking a risk on us. Like, we don't have much of a portfolio. But they used that first summer to build up that portfolio, and they've raised their price probably like 15x since that very first ad, or actually more. And this year they probably did 15 weddings, maybe one. I think we have one more left this season, but probably 14, 15 different weddings this summer. It's just been a really cool side hustle. And the way the math works out, like, it probably will never replace her day job income, but it's something that she really loves to do, and something that is kind of, I think, been valuable in terms of, hey, look, I'm more than just like my job title, right? Like I have worth in the world, like outside of what my company pays me, and I think that's been helpful too. Absolutely,
and that's a good point about hobbies. I'm actually on the lookout for a domain that's expiring. That one of the hobbies that I plan on pursuing more when I step away from my full-time job. I figure, I'm going to be trying to learn about this anyway. I'm going to be doing a lot of studying, a lot of research. So why not share what I learn as I do it, and then maybe that would turn into a side business down the road. Just sort of like the Mad Scientist has, really. That was a situation where I was like, I know I could get to financial independence quicker if I did a bunch of research, but I know I won't do that research unless I have some sort of external motivation. And, having to do a new post every once in a while is nice external motivation. So that's really,
there you go. People are counting on you.
Right, exactly. And that made me do all the the boring research and reading all the tax documents that I probably wouldn't have done otherwise. And then so I got to financial independence quicker and have this really cool thing that I built that, it's like I'm really proud of, and it's a lot of fun. So I think
now you're a business, so it opens up a whole new set of tax benefits for you.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so it's just loads of unexpected bonuses that wouldn't have come about if I didn't just give it a shot. And it sounds like that's what your wife did. She just threw an ad on Craigslist, and if it didn't work, then who cares? It's just a free ad on Craigslist, and that's
right.
Pretty similar to starting a site where you just it's you maybe out $10 for the domain and a little bit more for hosting, but really there's the barrier to entry for side hustles is so low that it makes sense to just try it. Is that what you found with talking to a lot of other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And even going back to the Craigslist example, like somebody shared a guest post on the site a couple months ago, and it was like, hey, I earned an extra $1,000 a month cleaning houses. And it just started like, she had been through, half a dozen like entrepreneurship training programs, but like never took action. And so she was sitting down with her sister one night and was like, fine, I'm just going to do this. And she posted an ad and started getting inquiries right away. And like, she was just like, hey, you know what? If you're responsive and polite and professional, you're immediately like, a level above anybody else who is out there on Craigslist. And, that kind of spreads from word of mouth. And, it was just kind of a good story about, putting yourself out there and taking action and kind of doing that investment in yourself. So like the Craigslist ad is free, but like the investment in equipment or the investment in training, is something that, you guys, you always talk about a lot about investing, but there's another realm to it that's outside of the markets.
Right.
And so I like try and preach about like, you can invest in education, you can invest in equipment, marketing software. So like another example in my wife's business was like a couple of venue specific, wedding fairs or wedding, what do they call them? Not like wedding shows. I guess that's like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Like a mini convention, right? You have like, 10 vendors and then they invite people in and they serve like food and wine and stuff. And so if it costs $200 or $500 to display at this thing and you book like, 3 or 4 weddings off of that, like that's a fantastic, return on investment. And the same thing, like I used to run a painting business back in college, and we kind of like finagled our way into the Seattle Home Show. It was like a $2,000 investment, which was really big and scary at the time. But we ended up turning that into like $70,000 worth of sales. And so it's just like, you can multiply the money much quicker than at least I could in the markets.
Sure. No, that's great advice. That's actually something I struggle with still. Like I either want to try to do everything myself, or it's very hard to get money out of my hands, even though when I know it's going to make, I could potentially grow it even more. So that's definitely something I've been trying to work on, but it's great advice because I completely agree. The money that I have spent on things like that have, been far greater return on investment than anything I've put in the market. So,
it's a fine. I mean, I've had my share of like, total write-off losses as well, but there's, I guess it's like more, higher risk, higher reward.
Right. So you actually, you've done a TEDx talk, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But I really enjoyed, your 3 C's: creation, connection, and contribution. I don't know how much you can get into it, but I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that, because, those 3 things on their own are extremely rewarding to do. But that's sort of what you talk about as far as in the context of entrepreneurship as well. So, could you just talk a little bit about that talk and what those 3 C's mean?
Yeah, I was such a wreck before this talk, because they're like, which I had volunteered for. So I was like, dude, why are you such a mess? But they had you're all mic'd up, and they had like the official like TEDx letters and the red carpet and the cameras and stuff. So it was pretty scary, but I was able to get through it, and it ended up being a pretty cool experience. But the 3 C's of talk kind of like about millennial entrepreneurship, I think they're really applicable across like any companies that the owners like really enjoy the work in doing. And so the first is creation, and people will ask, hey, what's the most important skill for entrepreneurs? And some people will say sales, and lately I've kind of said, the skill of learning new skills is really good. But before any of that, like, this skill of creation, like to create some sort of product or service that people want to buy. Because without that, you don't have anything to sell. And so in the photography business, it was like that, that initial hobby, that initial art of shooting good photographs. And in the shoe business is like that initial website. Like I'm, building some sort of thing that's like a useful tool, an asset for somebody or some product or service. In terms of connection, this is like, how are you communicating that with your customers? Is that ad on Craigslist? Is that some, Facebook group forum? Is that, Google ads in my case? Is like, who are you serving? And then finally, the contribution, you can interpret this as like, giving back in a kind of a nonprofit sense, but in the business sense, it's just like, who are you helping, right? Like, how are you making the world a better place, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm, helping thousands of people save money on shoes. Maybe it's not the most like noble cause in the world, and that was like another topic because the other TEDx speakers were all like working on like crazy like life-saving, world-saving projects. And I was like, I sold some shoes. But like, in the wedding photography examples, like, we're helping people capture their hopefully their only wedding, for the rest of their life. So kind of a cool kind of contribution to make to these people's lives.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and it's very important to keep an eye on all three. I made the mistake of thinking too hard about the first and the third and not understanding the connection bit. I had created, I'm a software developer, and I'd created this really cool tool that I thought was amazing. And then I was very surprised when nobody found it naturally, as I thought, I'll build it and they'll come. Just, that's how it works. But you need to figure out the connection piece as well.
That's the challenging part, especially on the blog and podcast front. It's like, everyone says, hey, just write epic stuff and people will find it. It's like, well, you kind of have to get the ball rolling. And even in self-publishing or like creating online courses, so yeah, there are big marketplaces like Amazon and like Udemy that you can tap into, but it's still kind of on you to provide that initial momentum to get those marketplaces to start to notice you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's think of a scenario. Imagine, maybe one of my readers or listeners is nearing financial independence, and maybe they're just looking for an extra $500 a month that would cover some supplemental spending, and they have they're just working their normal job and maybe will be quitting in the next year or two. I think it'd be a great idea to start something before you quit and have that momentum going into your early retirement. So I'm sure you've seen a bunch of different side hustlers, and you've done a lot of side hustling yourself. So what advice would you give, or where could somebody start with that? Because it's pretty daunting trying to think of something from scratch. Is there any way to help get that ball rolling?
Yeah, it really is intimidating to say, but like you got to understand, hey, everybody started from zero. Like every blogger started with 0 followers, 0 readers, and it's usually that kind of helps put things back in perspective. So the fastest way to get started is to, just figure out some sort of skill that you have and some company that is in need of that skill. And you can start by doing that by just looking through your resume, right? Like any job you've ever had, by definition, is a skill somebody thought was worth paying for. So if you can take that, to a freelance client, if you can take that on the road, that's fantastic. Now, if you're already the person who's nearing financial independence and you just need that extra little push to maybe accelerate things, you can definitely go that path. But you also have a little bit more freedom and flexibility to start some more speculative projects, like writing that book, trying to create these assets that you build once and they pay you over and over again.
Right.
Those I typically don't recommend for people like just getting started because it's like, it can be a slower path and it's a more speculative path. But if you're already pretty much set financially, like, hey, why not work on something that you really, really care about that has a potential to help a ton of people rather than, trying to do this, one-on-one consulting type of work.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. Ability to take more risk and potentially have a much bigger reward, which, a lot of people nearing financial independence are in exactly that situation. What are any themes that you've seen that, some of the more successful side hustles, or is it really just a varied mix of just trying to provide value in many different ways in many different niches? Is it, or is there some common themes?
Definitely some common themes. One of the common themes I see is tapping into existing marketplaces, right? So there's always going to be the appeal of having some massive audience of adoring fans that love you, and you can definitely work towards that. But in the meantime, one of the most common themes I see is leveraging these marketplaces that some other company has probably already raised venture capital, has already created. So Amazon is a fantastic example of that, both on the self-publishing side, and lately the hottest side hustle of the year is this what's called the Amazon FBA, fulfilled by Amazon business. And there's kind of two tiers to this. The first is sourcing products locally, like on clearance. So you can actually download the Amazon seller app, and I've been playing around with this summer. You go into Walmart, you go into lately I've had some luck at Best Buy and TJ Maxx and some of these stores, and you go in and you try to find some item that's on super sale locally that's worth more online, and you scan it with a little barcode reader, and it'll tell you what it's selling for on Amazon, what it's likely to fetch you after all their fees and stuff. Now that's pretty labor intensive, and there's not a lot of skill involved in that. So the second tier up is actually importing your own products from China, or manufacturing your own products. You can manufacture them locally too if the market is there, if the margin is there. So the guy I talked to on the podcast last year, this is actually the most popular episode of all time on the Side Hustle Show. He walked through. We found these onion goggles on Amazon. He was let's go through categories. So we clicked on kitchen and home or something, and we found these onion goggles, which are apparently prevent you from crying while you're cutting onions. And they were selling for $19.95, $20. And then we went on Alibaba.com, which is a Chinese manufacturing sourcing site, and we found the exact same picture, so exact same product, and they were $1.50 a piece or something. Okay, so if you can buy these for $1.50, and maybe they're going to be $3 or $4 by the time you get them shipped to the United States or something,
sure,
and sell them for $20, that's an interesting business. And so we kind of walk through a couple examples, and I have not yet pulled the trigger on any bulk import order, but I'm pretty excited by that opportunity. So the e-commerce stuff is just blowing up. The other marketplaces that I see are Fiverr. I met a guy on Fiverr who earned enough to buy a house within the first year, and so this is the marketplace of goods and services where everything starts at $5. I was like, dude, what could you possibly sell for $5 that you sold this many times to make? And so he's like, no, it's all about the upsells, so it's he had everything set up. So it was the $5 thing. It was some pre-created guide, PDF or audio file or something. And then it was if you want the extra that involves my actual time, you can add that to the order. It's this is fascinating stuff. So there's that. There's all the Craigslist stuff. Craigslist is a top 10 site in the country. So there's a huge amount of traffic there. If you have any sort of service offering, that's a very inexpensive way to reach a ton of potential buyers. What are the other marketplaces? Clarity.fm is one of my new favorite marketplaces. It's a by-the-minute consulting service.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, $1,400 this year. Just talking to people on the phone. So you set up a profile there, add in your areas of expertise, have a few friends or colleagues call you to seed some initial reviews, and you're off to the races there. So it's kind of that's one of the common themes I see And the other kind of common theme or pattern that I see is the transition from employee to, part-time freelancer to full-time freelancer, then to like agency, right? Like if I have enough margin built into my service, I can hire people underneath me to do the work. And now I've kind of removed myself. I built a system, I built a process. And then the next step beyond that for people who really, take it to the next level is building some sort of, product or software around that. Like, hey, we've been in the business of serving, real estate agents for the past 3 or 4 years. A common problem that we see is X, and so we built this software solution to specifically solve that. So that's kind of the side hustle path, or one of the paths that I see.
Well, that's really cool. Yeah, and as you were speaking there, just thinking about all the different platforms and all the different opportunities, it seems like this is like the best time ever to start a side hustle. There's just so many different environments where you could potentially start and gain traction quickly.
Yeah, there's been, and even like the Ubers of the world, the Airbnbs of the world, like there's this whole trend towards, peer-to-peer commerce and kind of this disintermediation, if we want to like sound fancy, where, this didn't exist, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's a very cool opportunity.
That is really cool. What was the podcast you mentioned? I can put a link in the show notes for the Fulfillment by Amazon.
This is episode 84, so I'll send you a link to that.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. I was actually just listening to another one of your episodes with Brian Harris, and I thought that one was really good as well. He was just talking about, ways you could just start offering these services very quickly. You don't even, find a blog that has a certain, step-by-step guide for doing something that's sort of complicated, and then just start approaching people that like that blog post and say, hey, I'll do it for you for a fee, which is a really unique approach, but a cool way to get started quickly. And then, yeah, as he said in the episode, maybe then productize that service if you've gained enough traction along the way. And I think that pathway that you talked about as well is just a great way to think about it. You don't have to plan for your big, multi-employee business from the start. Just each step, start working your way down that path.
Yeah, the episode with Brian is one of the most popular ones of the year too. Super smart dude, and he just breaks it down like step 1, step 2, step 3. Like, here's what you do. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gold.
Yeah, it was really good. So I'll link to that as well in the show notes. But yeah, I usually ask all of my guests, what's one piece of advice you could give to someone maybe starting on the path to financial independence, or maybe even getting close. Is there anything in particular you would offer?
Well, there's 2 ways to get rich, right? Make more or desire less. And, I try and tackle that, but from both angles. So I would say, remember to, as much as you're investing in the markets, take a percentage to invest in yourself. And the way I like to look at this is as a percentage of net worth. And so if you have a net worth of $100,000 and you look at some startup cost or something like that, that's going to cost, $1,000 or $5,000, right? Like, it's a 5% bet, at the max. So like, if it goes belly up as complete wash, like, you're at 95%, as well off as you were before, which, like, you can probably live on 95% as much food. You can probably live on 95% as much oxygen as you are today. Like, it's not going to be a lifestyle changer. And so I try and think of risky decisions or investment decisions based on those little bets.
Oh, that's great advice. And yeah, even if it fails, I'm sure you learn a lot in the process, and that'll help you on the next one as well. So people can find you at sidehustlenation.com, and you have a podcast there, and I'm assuming they can get in touch with you by email potentially, or...
Yeah, email is just nick@sidehustlenation.com. Okay. We mentioned a couple of the most popular episodes, and if you hit sidehustlenation.com/ideas, they have a whole laundry list of part-time business ideas you can check out. Yeah,
that's really good, actually. So it's up to 79 last time I checked, and I went through them all, and there's a ton of good ideas that people can get started. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll link to that as well in the show notes. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And hopefully a bunch of people start a side hustle, and then they'll have even more income once they hit financial independence than they even imagined. So, yeah, I really appreciate it, Nick. And thanks again. Hopefully talk to you soon.
You bet. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Finance.